With us, it is the former Attorney General of this amazing state of Indiana, Curtis Hill. Curtis, thanks for joining me on the show.
Thank you for having me, Micah. I appreciate being here.
This is awesome. We've got some really great things to talk about. We're going to get into your Elvis impersonation days, but that's later. That's for the end of the show, so stay tuned. You don't want to miss that. But I wanted you to kind of talk about your time in government. And you were the Attorney General for 4 years, 2016 to 2020. And I remember that was right when I was getting involved. You were the first person I got to vote for at the convention.
Good.
2016.
Good choice.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Technically, my first vote was to Steve Carter only because I told him he would. But then once he got out, then I was all you. So
I'll take that.
So, because he took me to coffee, I'd never know. I was like, this guy.
I didn't try to buy votes.
You did not. You did not try to buy votes. You're right. Steve's great. He was not buying my vote. The coffee was not why I voted for him.
Let's clear that up.
But I was really happy though to see you govern the way you did over 4 years. You did a great job in my opinion. But you took shots. Let's talk a little bit about Indianapolis, deep state swampiness, because a lot of times people think the swamp is Washington, but boy, we're seeing it in our office. You saw it. There is a whole lot of swamp in Indianapolis too. And yeah, tell us about your time and just kind of let's dive into that a little bit.
Sure. It's all about control and the people who have it and don't want to give it up. What's interesting about my rise to Attorney General is I didn't get picked by somebody in Indianapolis to run for Attorney General. I wasn't chosen. I wasn't recruited, if you were. So when I came out of nowhere, out of north central Indiana, where you don't get statewide candidates, and one of the reasons you don't is because it's damn difficult to run a campaign from northern Indiana or southern Indiana.
A statewide
campaign.
Yeah.
So it becomes difficult. So there was nobody that was calling out and saying, Curtis Hill, come down and run for Attorney General.
Because the amount of money you have to spend when you travel 6 hours south to like Evansville, you got hotels, the gas.
Well, it's not just money, it's time.
It's time. Oh, yes.
It's time. The turnaround, if you're in central Indiana and you're running for statewide office, everything's about an hour or 2 hours away and back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But if you're in northern Indiana, everything is at least 3 hours down and 3 hours back.
Yeah.
And the number of times I had to go to Evansville, and I always had to come back the same night. That's a 5.5 hour shot one way and a 5.5 hour shot another way. So it makes it difficult. So there's not a whole lot of people looking for people outside the donut communities to run for office. So here I come. I'm a prosecutor. I'd been a career prosecutor, had been elected 4 times, very successful prosecutor, very aggressive prosecutor. And I thought, what can I do going forward that takes advantage of the skill set that I've had as prosecutor, as a lawyer, and my political interest, and move forward. And the most natural thing was the Attorney General's role. The Attorney General's position, in my estimation, before I assumed it, was fairly routine. The lawyer for the state, and not very big in that sense. And I thought we could do something stronger. I think that we have a stronger personality, a stronger force in that office that would be good for statewide adventure. So I decided to run for office, run for Attorney General without a layer of support in Indianapolis per se.
Which probably made some people mad.
Well, I don't think people cared at first because I think people thought it was improbable that I would win. I was running against, in a primary or a convention, Steve Carter, as you mentioned, was in the race. Randy Head, a popular state senator, was in the race.
I forgot about that.
There was a woman who was on the staff of General Zeller that was running. So we had a pretty full complement in the field. So I think a lot of people in the typical structure didn't anticipate that I would break through that scene. And I think we caught a lot of people off guard. And what happened, as you recall, I did win the convention on the third ballot. I was leading the entire time. I won on the third ballot, and now I'm the nominee for the Republican Party. Well, at that point, there's a lot of people who didn't give me the time of day, who would give me the time of day only because I was expected to win, but not necessarily because they were supportive. So I give you that background to say that coming into it, I was not expected to be there, and people had not necessarily invested in Curtis Hill to the degree that they were comfortable with what kind of leadership I would bring. In other words, that's a word. That's another way of saying, can you control this guy? Well, the answer is no. And I think people started to realize that right away. That's not my personality. I don't consider myself a rabble-rouser per se, but I take a position, I stand for that position, I support that position, and I'm fairly strong-minded. So when I became Attorney General, there were some issues that would come up that I was accused of veering out of my lane or weighing in when I shouldn't weigh in.
Give us some examples of those. What were some of the
exchange.
The needle exchange.
The very first thing that came up was needle exchange. Governor Holcomb was promoting needle exchange as the answer to the opioid problem. Suggesting that if we gave out clean needles, that would somehow dissipate the problem. And I pointed out, no, that's not true. That if you give a person you take a dirty needle away and you give them a clean needle, they're still injecting this stuff into their systems, subjecting them to overdose.
Overdose, yeah.
So you weren't really clearing up the situation, you were making it worse.
And by the state taking part in that, it almost seems like the state is endorsing it.
Endorsing, that's exactly right. The messaging was that the state was okay with people ingesting dangerous drugs.
Needle exchanges have never worked well. Bloomington, right now, I think is one of the last places that's doing it, and it's not gone well. And I know Governor Braun is taking an active look into. I think we are cleaning it up, but it's just it is not. It never works.
Well, it can be somewhat effective if your goal is to stop hepatitis and to stop the spread of particular diseases. But if your objective is to stop overdoses and you're still giving needles to people to potentially overdose, it's certainly not doing what it was supposed to do. Yeah. We took a position against that, and it upset a lot of the folks who I would say were looking for a soft solution that they could sell regardless of whether or not it worked.
Yeah. They wanted a political win.
They wanted a political win, and my office and my staff, we were looking for ways to actually win and be truthful about the process. And so we kicked heads with the administration. We kicked heads with some of the members of the General Assembly. That's one example. But those are the types of things that ruffle the feathers of those who want to control the show here in Indianapolis.
You had the driver's license, right?
The X.
So the X. Again, this is crazy that all these things are happening under Republican leadership, but you stopped the needle exchange. They wanted to put an X on the driver's license for people who didn't know their gender. Or
Micah, they did put the X on.
They did put it on. Wow.
They put the X on, and they saw it as a rule change. And my office purposely stepped in and said, no, if you're doing a rule change, you got to come through the Attorney General's office. And we did not approve it because I said that changing someone's gender is a substantive act, not a procedural act.
Yeah.
And if it's substantive, it needs to come from the General Assembly. If the legislature wants to establish a third classification of gender, of human being, and they want to stand accountable for it, they're perfectly free to do that. But not an agency, not the DMV.
Yeah.
And so we stopped that process. And
that's crazy that in Indiana we had an X.
Well, what's even crazier is that everybody knew about it. The governor's office knew about it. The leadership in the General Assembly knew about it. Everybody was kind of cool with it because they wanted to kind of let this happen, but they didn't want to be responsible for it. So here's what would be. You'd go to the license branch and you'd see this X, and you'd ask the person, well, where did that come from? And they'd say, I don't know, it just happened. And if you'd ask a legislator, they would say, it wasn't me, that was the rule-making authority of the BMV. Everybody has deniability, and yet we've made this entirely huge cultural change.
Yeah, super woke, And this would have been in 2017, 2018?
That was 2019, 2020.
Okay, so woke wasn't as woke as it is today, but it was getting there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing too, you went after Klopfer, the abortionist, right? So you had this abortionist, Northwest Indiana. And he had offices in Lake County, St. Joe County, and Fort Wayne. Okay, so we found out after he died that he had the corpses of 2,411 children in his house, in his basement, in his storage units, and they were in bottles.
He actually lived in Chicago. We had run him out of business in Indiana. He had a residence in Chicago. I don't know how that worked, that he lived in Chicago and worked in Indiana, but he was very prolific in what he did. And after we ran him out of business, a little time passed, and he died in September of 2019. And his family was cleaning out the garage, and they came across these aborted fetuses. And to their credit, they notified authorities. They notified the Illinois authorities. We found out about it, and we suspected that they were Indiana babies because we knew he didn't have a license to practice in the state of Illinois. He practiced in Indiana. So we did an investigation, determined those were Indiana babies. Wow. And as a matter of form, I remember contacting Kwame, the Attorney General for the state of Illinois.
Okay.
And I said, look, we want to come into Indiana and conduct our own investigation, and if appropriate, bring those fetuses back to the state of Indiana. And they were all too happy to cooperate.
Okay.
Because they didn't know what to do with them.
Okay.
So we went in, we sent staff members from the AG's office, we cataloged and identified.
So they were in his house in Illinois.
They were in the garage in Illinois.
Wow.
And there were also some that were in the trunk of one of his cars.
Oh my gosh! And how were they contained?
Well, and they had been there some of them had been there for 17, 18 years, and they were a part of a file in bags. I mean,
oh my gosh!
There's no way to actually imagine what our staff was seeing.
The evil
as they were going through this process.
She had these babies in bags, in jars. I mean, that's something like right out of a horror movie.
Well, and you could see feet, hands, body parts. It was a horrible situation. So what we did was we brought them back. We couldn't identify them per se. The records were horrible. Yeah. But what we did do was we determined that we could give them a sense of humanity and dignity. And so we chose a location in St. Joe County, a burial site, and held a service and buried them collectively, 2,411 altogether, at this site in St. Joe County.
Wow.
And we had a ceremony. We did a ceremony that I presided over as a representative of the state, and then we stepped back and opened it up to the public. And so there were a large community of pro-life activists and religious entities that took over from there.
It's awesome that you did that. I remember being so proud of our state when we did that, but at the same time, the horrific evils of abortion on full display. I mean, that's what it was. And praise God, we've overturned Roe and banned abortion in Indiana. But boy, just the evils. I mean, abortion is just pure evil. I mean, there's no other. We like to point our fingers at the Nazis for what they did in the concentration camps to the Jewish people. I mean, they can't even hold a candle to the amount of people we've murdered here in the United States to abortion.
I'm glad you used that word murder, because the murder in the state of Indiana is the knowingly or intentionally killing another human being.
Yeah.
And a fetus, a human fetus, is clearly a human being.
It's a human being.
So one has to ask themselves the question, how is it that we don't characterize the death of an unborn child by the hands of someone intentionally as murder?
Yeah.
And why are we so reluctant to go down that path? Now, it's not to say that people like you and I want to see women who find themselves in an unwanted pregnancy locked up in jail.
Right.
That's not the point.
Yeah.
But the point is, we have to provide a level of protection to the unborn that's commensurate with their circumstances. If you had a woman who murdered her 9-month-old baby, we would have no
problem prosecuting her,
teeing that up.
Yeah.
Should that be different for a woman who murders her 9-month-old fetus, or her 6-month-old fetus, or her 12-week-old fetus?
Sure.
It's an issue that I think a state like Indiana needs to address, because we claim to be pro-life, and yet, and as you know, yes, we've got some pretty good pro-life legislation, but it isn't exactly pretty how it got there.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a lot of our folks.
We're chomping at the bit.
No,
it was crazy. I remember being here for the special session as an activist, and I couldn't believe the amount of pro-life endorsed or right-to-life endorsed senators and House members that just got cold feet.
Because they never had, when Roe v. Wade was law, they never had to face the music. You could run in Indiana as a pro-life candidate and never be challenged as to what that meant.
Yeah.
Roe gets kicked out, Dobbs comes in, and Roe doesn't do away with abortion. Roe sets the clock back and says, okay, you states have to deal with it. Now, all of a sudden, people who've gotten away with being able to say, oh, I'm pro-life, I'm pro-life, I'm pro. Well, okay, what does pro-life mean to you? Well, I don't know. Well, and that's one of the things that we see. How many times have you talked to somebody outside the state of Indiana that says, oh, you're from Indiana, that's great, that's a red state. I'm sorry. I mean,
we've got our problems.
We have politics. We have game playing that goes on.
Yeah.
You have a supermajority. It doesn't mean that everything just kind of goes smoothly.
Yeah.
You have infighting. You have jealousies. You have pettiness, and it's all alive and well. President Trump came to Elkhart, my hometown, and I got a call from the White House saying, "Hey, would you like to introduce the vice president and the president and give a little talk?" And I said, "Well, sure." So he shows up at Northside Gym. As I recall, I was the only statewide elected that was there. There were some other folks that were there. I'm sorry, that spoke. That were invited to speak. And it was we had about 10,000 people at Northside Gym. It was a great event. I got great exposure, maybe too much exposure.
Okay. Now you became a threat.
The president called me out. He said, and we have our great Attorney General from the state of Indiana, Curtis Hill, who got more votes than anybody in the history of the state of Indiana, except Trump. He got fact checked on that.
Did he really? Did you get more than Trump?
He got fact. I didn't fact check him.
Okay.
I was sitting there saying, "Come on," but I actually beat him by about 80,000 votes.
Did you really?
So someone fact checked that.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But he was having some fun. But
funny.
Because of the notoriety of that, you could certainly see a change or some movement in the establishment side of things. There's nothing wrong with our party endorsing a mother and a father raising children in a loving home.
Well, and I always say that's the gold standard. The way God set it up to work is a mom and a dad raising kids in the nuclear family. That's and you can go back through history. Strong nations have strong families.
That's it. And sometimes it's a step parent. Sometimes the grandparents have to step in. Sometimes neighbors foster.
Right.
There's all sorts of things. But as you say, that's the gold standard.
The gold standard doesn't mean that we throw everybody else out who's not there at the gold standard, but to get rid of the gold standard and say, well, there is no standard now, that's really dangerous.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And so for me, I didn't think it was that big a deal. But what happens is when you step out like that and you demonstrate leadership and it starts to connect, people who are worried about where you're going start to step up and step up their game.
Kind of unfortunately, we're caught in the crossfires of that. Now, we've got Todd Rokita as our Attorney General now, and he's a lot like you. He's a bulldog, very conservative, and so praise God, it didn't kind of from the state's perspective, we didn't lose a strong conservative. But I felt you got railroaded pretty hardcore in that convention, I think it was in a lot of ways a response. Because you had been bucking the system and the establishment, and they wanted to stick it to you, and they didn't trust you, they couldn't control you.
I think that's absolutely it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a matter of having their guy, their boy, if you will. And the reality is that I've never been anybody's boy.
That's right, yeah. So another time you stood up to the establishment was 2020, summer of 2020. There was the mask mandate that Eric Holcomb had put out. I remember seeing that. I was like, this can't be happening in Indiana. Our governor doesn't have this type of fiat dictatorship authority where he can just write on a piece of paper, the law is you have to wear a mask.
And you will go to jail if you don't. I mean,
that's crazy.
That was what was interesting about it.
Yeah.
He created a statute by executive authority making it a Class B misdemeanor to not wear a mask.
That's insane.
And he,
crazy.
And he did this in a press release. And I remember the same day we brought our team together. And by 9 o'clock that night, I had an opinion out that said, no, you don't have the authority to do this.
Yeah.
You have absolutely no authority to create a legislation of this nature.
Yeah, from the executive branch.
No, you can't do it. Now, if the general, going
Sure.
back to what I said before, if the General Assembly wants to create a law that says if you wear a mask, or if you don't wear a mask, we can lock you up, they can do that and face the consequences.
Yeah.
But the governor had no authority. And what was interesting, we put that information out, and he backed out.
Yeah. Well, it was you, and then we had some sheriffs that stood up to him and said, we're not going to enforce this.
Right.
So, state troopers want to come in and try to lock people up. Well, you're going to have to face the deputies of the sheriff's department.
What's amazing is when all this was going down, we already knew
this was like June.
We already knew that COVID could be contained.
Yeah.
That COVID was not affecting young children. That COVID was not deadly for people that were not over the age of 70
right?
with comorbidities.
Yeah.
So it was manageable, and yet we were still doing these control games, like issuing executive orders every 30 days, to keep controlling, to keep managing the problem, and I think our governor, as well as governors across the country, were using it as a tool to be able to provide notoriety for themselves. The COVID press conferences that different governors would have. This is what we're doing today. When what they were really doing was stifling the freedoms of the citizenry, and we were very pleased that we stood our ground. I don't remember a whole lot of elected officials at that time that were saying no to the mask.
Yeah, yeah. I remember being in a political function somewhere like 2021. And people were still wearing masks. I saw through the mask nonsense early on. I never wore a mask, but we stand up to get a picture, and there's about 5 of us. Now these are all people on the same side of the issues that you and I are on. And as we stand up, nobody's wearing a mask. As we stand up to get a picture, every single person put the mask on. And I remember looking at him like, you've got to be kidding me! Like
to give the appearance,
to
play the game.
And I just was like, this is our side of the aisle, and yet here we are.
Micah, we're supposed to be smarter than this. I mean, when you looked at the mask itself, it only works, only a certain type of mask worked.
Yeah.
But cloth didn't work. And
Yeah.
So you were okay if you wore a handkerchief covering your nose and face and looked like you were covering something up. There was no science behind it.
No.
It's just like the 6-foot rule.
Yeah.
Who came up with 6 feet?
Totally arbitrary.
Why not 6 feet 2?
Yeah.
Why not?
Do you
4
know?
feet?
Do you know the story on that was it was initially going to be 12 feet. Somebody in a meeting, it was Fauci and some other people in Washington, they said we can't do 12 feet because it'll destroy the economy. That's impossible for us to continue to do business in an economy where you have to 12.
Let's go 6.
So they said 6. There was no science. There was no. It was literally like, well, we can do 6.
And then you had the silly little arrows in the grocery store.
So dumb.
It was
so dumb. So well, I appreciate you, Curtis. You've been a bold voice, and you've taken some real hard, forceful stances on the right issues. And you paid the price. I mean, you definitely, unfortunately, are probably a political casualty. But I look at it as you can stand before your maker someday and say, "Hey, I spoke up when the rest of the machine was trying to get me to shut up and sit down." And
absolutely.
And so that I appreciate that. Last thing, you have a secret talent.
It's no secret.
You are an Elvis impersonator. Now, I don't know if you know this, Curtis, but you're black.
I've been told.
Elvis was white, but you have a great voice.
Elvis was white, and it's no secret that Elvis ripped off.
That's true. The black community,
the black music.
That's right. He
sang they say he sang like a black man.
Good point. So maybe you actually embody more of Elvis than even Elvis embodied.
I think that would be one way of looking at it.
That's right. So what's your favorite song to sing?
Oh, I like Burning Love. I like It's Now or Never. The Wonder of You. I like the ones where his voice was very rich and just.
That's I think that's. Yeah, I'm not going to ask you to sing, but you can bring the when
I can bring the home, baby. Bruce Borders and I.
Oh yeah, Representative Borders. He does it too.
He does. Well, not only does Bruce do the impersonation, unlike me, I've got my own costume. I had a costume made.
He's got a costume.
Well, I was getting into that. Okay. I had a costume made 30 years ago. One costume made that I can barely fit into now. Bruce has about 30. Custom Elvis outfits that I won't get into how much they are, but they cost a pretty penny, and they're beautiful. Now they
look legit.
They're gorgeous. He let me borrow one. He and I did a joint show together at the rooftop
ballroom,
and it was a gas. We had a ball. We sang separately, and then we sang together. So it was a lot of fun. And that's what Elvis, people say, well, why would you do that? It's kind of silly. I think it's good for people to see people of authority or people who are in so-called high positions able to engage in fun.
Yeah.
To be
you don't take
normal,
yourself
as it
you
were.
don't take yourself too seriously.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love it, Curtis. Well, thanks for joining us today on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
Yeah.
Always glad to be here.
Now,
I'm proud of you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Now you and I are driving up to Elkhart. We're going to jump in the car, go speak at a TPUSA event,
And they're very excited. They're big fans of Micah Beckwith at
Well,
Elkhart, so they're excited to see you.
looking forward to it. So, hey, thanks again, Curtis. Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you.
Yep.